Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of A Treasury of Foolishly Forgotten Americans. Pirates, Skinflints, Patriots, and other colorful characters stuck in the footnotes of history. By Michael Farquhar. Narrated by Johnny Heller and directed by Mark Avila. This book is copyrighted 2008 by Michael Farquhar. This recording is copyrighted 2008 by Recorded Books. The author opens this book with a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. "Glory is fleeting, but obscurity is forever." And now, A Treasury of Foolishly Forgotten Americans.
Introduction. History is the essence of innumerable biographies, Thomas Carlyle once wrote. However, only a relative handful ever get read, which is unfortunate because so many fascinating American lives are overlooked in favor of the nation's more familiar icons. Almost a century before Martin Luther King Jr. had his dream, Tunis Campbell acted on a nearly identical one. For 50 years, the FBI was associated entirely with J. Edgar Hoover, but there were 5 directors before him, and one of them, William J. Burns, was such an esteemed detective that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle dubbed him America's Sherlock Holmes. Sitting Bull and Geronimo are universally identified as great Native American chiefs. But what about Sarah Winnemucca, a powerful Indian leader in her own right? The murderous pilgrim, the Quaker martyr, the socialite explorer, and all the other men and women chronicled here may not necessarily have shaped the American experience, but they undoubtedly added to its unique texture. And though the course of history would probably have continued to run unimpeded had Anna Jarvis not created Mother's Day before she went crazy, or had Alexander Boss Shepherd left the nation's capital a muddy morass, somehow it would have been a little less American. Chapter 1. John Billington, Mayflower Murderer. Not every passenger aboard the Mayflower was a God-fearing pilgrim. One was a murderer in the making. His name was John Billington, an ornery fellow with a foul mouth, who, along with his badly behaved children, made the miserable journey across the Atlantic even more unbearable. He would go on to do far worse. The Billington family, John, his wife Eleanor, and their 2 sons, were among the majority of Mayflower passengers known as strangers, who, unlike the separatists or saints, were not necessarily seeking religious freedom in the New World. It's unclear how they came to board the ship, but once they did, they were nothing but trouble. Pilgrim leader William Bradford, who became governor of the Plymouth colony, called them an ill-conditioned lot, unfit for the company, and one of the profanest families among the Pilgrims. John Billington was by some accounts the ringleader of an aborted mutiny aboard the Mayflower, while his son Francis almost blew up the ship when he fired a musket near several kegs of powder. A rash act, writes scholar Albert Borowitz, that threatened to send them to colonize the ocean floor. Things didn't get much better when the Pilgrims reached Plymouth. Billington was one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact, which was produced partly as a result of the shipboard rebellion. He and the other signers promised to work for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. It became quickly apparent that he had no intention of keeping his part of the pact. As if disease and starvation weren't difficult enough during that first harsh winter of 1620 to 1621, the Pilgrims had to contend with Billington's big mouth and bad temper. He bullied his neighbors and refused to honor a summons for the military service that was required of every able-bodied colonist. That was bad enough, but when he badmouthed the colony's military chief, Miles Standish, making opprobrious speeches against him, as Governor Bradford wrote, it was clear that the time had come for some serious attitude adjustment, Pilgrim style. He was sentenced to be bound by his neck and heels, an excruciating ordeal that made every muscle feel like it was on fire. Suddenly all his bluster seemed to disappear. As the ropes were applied, he humbled himself and begged for mercy, after which the sympathetic magistrates released him. Billington, however, had not learned his lesson. In 1624, He was implicated in a scandal involving...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?